right, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much for those of you that came out in person and for those of you joining us online. We have a wonderful presentation and panel discussion. We have Jeff Faulk, and he is going to be giving a presentation on stress and relapse. What's the link? I've known Jeff for a number of years now, and he's just an incredible guy. He's a licensed addiction counselor at Gateway Community Services. I've seen his presentation. It's phenomenal. He's a wonderful speaker, so we are very blessed to have him. Thank you so much for coming. And after Jeff gives his presentation, we have an esteemed panel. We have Trudy Nelson. She's a licensed addiction counselor at Seeking Recovery. We have Shauna Applegate. She's a family nurse practitioner at Alluvian. And last but not least, we have Ben Horn, who is a licensed addiction counselor at Rocky Mountain Treatment Center. So I know with COVID-19, it's been a very stressful time for us all. And tonight you're going to get some real nuts and bolts ways that you can cope with all this additional stress in a healthy way. So without further ado, Jeff, come on up and we're just going to get this thing going. So thank you all for joining us. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, Thomas. Is this mic working? You guys hear me okay? I think my voice will probably carry. So yeah, that was very nice, Thomas. You kind of setting the bar kind of high. Yeah, I put together a PowerPoint. Actually, I'm 53 years old, and this is the first PowerPoint I put together. So be kind. I think it did an okay job, but it's not anything too fancy. But I did want to start out, we're talking about stopping the stigma, right? And so I want to start out by sharing a little story that I was thinking about that really, for me, it certainly illustrates the stigma associated with mental health addiction. When I was a counselor, inpatient counselor at Rocky Mountain Treatment Center, we had a request from the school, Holy Spirit, the school here in town during Red Ribbon Week to come there and talk to the students there. And so I kind of volunteered to go over there, and actually some of the clients at the time wanted to go over there also. And they were willing to talk to the kids a little bit. Well, I thought that we're going to go into a classroom and there was going to be, 12 or 15 people in there, and we get over there and they usher us into the gymnasium, and they bring in all the kids that went to school there, all the way from, I think it was kindergarten, all the way up to 8th grade, and then all the staff comes in. And so I was a little nervous about that, and I wasn't expecting it. But as we're sitting there, I'm trying to figure out, okay, what am I going to say to this entire group? And I introduced myself. Name's Jeff. I'm a licensed addictions counselor. And I talked to them a little bit about, I was providing them a little bit of my background. And it went something like this. In 1992, I was a federal officer with the Department of Justice for about 4 years. During that time, I received a lot of awards and recognition for my accomplishments and my drug seizures and my interventions. 1995, I went to work for the Glacier County Sheriff's Office in Cut Bank. While I was there, I worked my way up through the ranks to eventually I was undersheriff for 6 years there. But I even went back a little further and say, my dad was a science teacher. He taught science at North Toole County High School in Sunburst, Montana for 50 years. My dad was on the Today Show. They said in high school, I excelled at athletics. I was all-state football and basketball. I played in a Treasure State game. I got recruited by the University of Montana Grizzlies to come play football for them, but I also got recruited to play basketball in college. And so I wanted to go play basketball, so I went off to play basketball. I was a DARE officer for about 5 years. I was president of Cut Bank Crime Stoppers. And so certainly that all this stuff might sound boastful and arrogant. There was a time that that would exactly be the purpose of that for me. But my question to these students was, what do you guys think an addict looks like? Talking about stigmas, stereotypes. And who were the first ones to raise their hands? The first graders and the kindergartners. And so their hands go up, and I start calling on these kids up front. Tell me what you think an addict looks like, or an alcoholic. And of course, one of the first ones says, they got messy hair. Okay, some addicts and alcoholics do have messy hair. Another one raises their hand. They can't hold a job. Okay, another one raises their hand. They live in the alleys. That was an opportunity for me to try to communicate to them what addiction really looks like. And I said, I'm an addict. In 2010, I went to treatment for opiate addiction. And I said, I did a lot of things that I never thought I would do in my addiction. And of course, they were all just stunned that after I told them everything that I did in my life, all these wonderful things, that I was a drug addict. And that certainly is a stigma, and I think it's important, you know, certainly like this week, what a wonderful opportunity to bring information and knowledge to the public. To say addiction, alcoholism, it doesn't care how much money we make, what color our skin is, what religion we are. It affects us all in the exact same way. Addiction nearly took everything I had in my life. And it's been, I can't believe that it's been a decade since my life completely fell apart. But there's hope for recovery. And it certainly, with events like this, helps us share that message of the possibility of restoration and hope in our life. So, yeah, today I'm going to talk about stress and relapse. So you're going to see a lot of my backside because I'm going to be turning around and reading from this. Even got this upside down. Is this going to work, or am I going to have to ask you to advance it? Okay, all right, okay. We'll go with that. So we begin with relapses are one of the biggest obstacles a recovering addict must overcome. We often hear that relapse is unfortunately a part of recovery. But many define relapse as a choice to return to using a drug that a user has been addicted to and since quit using. Many things can cause someone to relapse, but one of the most significant reasons behind relapse is stress. And stress is a very broad topic that includes a lot of things in our life. Go ahead and advance it. Stress is defined as a state of mental or emotional strain caused by adverse circumstances. And, you know, we're not alone in that. We all experience stress at one point or another. Most people deal with feelings of stress. In fact, one study found that 33% of adults report experiencing high levels of perceived stress. I mean, to me, 33% sounds like a pretty low number to me. I think that it's probably higher, but we talk about different factors that can cause stress. And we have some examples of here. We talk about marriage, employment, trouble finding stable housing, any situation that's unfamiliar, violent, or abuse. I mean, there's just so many forms of stress that we deal with. And we have external stresses, we have internal stresses. Internal being our feelings, our emotions, and external being those forces from the outside. It's Chris Farley. It was one of my favorite pictures, but I thought that illustrated stress pretty well. It's I don't look like that anymore because I don't have any hair to stick up. But we have potential psychological and emotional responses to chronic stress. And what do those look like for us? We certainly can express them through mood changes such as anger, depression, high anxiety, panic attacks, suicidal thoughts, and difficulty focusing on tasks at hand. And the physiological effects of stress on the brain. So we're going to talk a little bit about how that physiologically, biologically, and chemically, I'm going to kind of squeeze into a short slide here, but stress is a chain reaction. When someone experiences a stressful event, the amygdala, an area of the brain that contributes to emotional processing, sends a distress signal to the hypothalamus. This area of the brain functions like a command center, communicating with the rest of the body through the nervous system so that the person has the energy to fight or flee, or what we most commonly also hear that is fight or flight. So, no, go back. It's okay. The fight or flight response is responsible for outward physical reactions most people associate with stress, including increased heart rate, heightened senses, a deeper intake of oxygen, and rush of adrenaline. Finally, a hormone called cortisol is released, which helps to restore the energy lost in the response when the stressful event is over. Cortisol levels fall and the body returns to stasis. So as we experience stress, we actually have this physiological and this chemical response in our bodies. And what I'm going to go on to talk about is what it can be very hard on the body and the brain if we are in constant states of high stress in our life. It can have some real negative effects on us. So stress itself isn't necessarily a bad thing. There are certainly good things about stress. Stress can help study for an exam or meet a deadline. So there's certainly stress can be beneficial to us. But we're talking about today how chronic stress can be harmful to us. Cortisol's function are part of the natural process of the body. In moderation, the hormone is perfectly normal and healthy. Its functions are multiple. In addition to restoring balance to the body after a stressful event, cortisol helps regulate blood sugar levels in the cells and has utilitarian value in the hippocampus, where memories are stored and processed. So again, we're talking about chronic stress. And I don't know if I certainly can relate to chronic stress because it was and continues to be a challenge in my life. But when we experience chronic stress, the body makes more cortisol than it has a chance to release. This is when cortisol and stress can lead to trouble. High levels of cortisol can wear down the brain's ability to function as it should be functioning. According to several studies, chronic stress impairs brain function in multiple ways. It can disrupt synapse regulation, resulting in the loss of sociability and the avoidance of interactions with others. Stress can actually kill brain cells also, and even reduce the size of the brain. Chronic stress has a shrinking effect on the prefrontal cortex, the area of the brain responsible for memory and for learning. While stress can shrink the prefrontal cortex, it can increase the size of the amygdala, which can make the brain more receptive to stress. Cortisol is believed to create a domino effect that hardwires pathways between the hippocampus and the amygdala in a way that might create a vicious cycle by creating a brain that becomes predisposed to constant state of fight or flight. How exhausting is that? If we got chronic stress going on in our life on a daily basis, that can be really harmful to us psychologically, biologically, physiologically, spiritually, and we can mention all those areas. It can be exhausting. So how does it affect us? It actually physically can affect us. I think probably a lot of us can relate with when we're experiencing high stress with physical symptoms. I usually certainly feel my muscles tighten. I get headaches, I get stomach aches, but it certainly has a physical effect on us. Increased heart disease potential, high blood pressure, even diabetes. Other systems of the body stop working properly too, including the digestive, excretory, and reproductive structures. Toxic stress can impair the body's immune system and exacerbate any already existing illnesses. I certainly have known people in my life and myself when I wasn't managing my stress very well. I was certainly more susceptible to getting sick. I don't know if you guys ever noticed that correlation, is if you're under a lot of stress for long periods of time, that actually our immune systems are decreased and we're more susceptible for illnesses. And so that's certainly a real thing that does happen. Plasticity and neuroplasticity refers to the way the neural pathways are able to reform in the brain. It's true that these pathways, like the one between the hippocampus and the amygdala, can get severely damaged due to constant exposure to stress. But such changes are not necessarily permanent. While stress can negatively affect the brain and body can recover. So, I guess good and bad news is the younger you are, the more resilient we are to being able to repair some of the damage that toxic stress can do to us. And so age does have a direct correlation with the reversibility of stress-related damage. It's much more difficult for older adults to regain or create new neural pathways than their younger counterparts. But not all hope is lost for us old people. We still have an ability to repair some of the damage that is done over years of experiencing toxic stress. That's not to say all hope is lost, like I said, for us older adults. PNAS points out that interventions or activities that combat stress, wear and tear on the brain are effective regardless of what age we are. So it doesn't matter. If we can make certain changes in our life, certainly it begins with awareness and then actually following through with our willingness to incorporate some of these different tools that we can use to help regulate and relieve stress, we can do a lot of good for ourselves and become healthier individuals. And as we all know, we're all going to experience stress, but chronic stress can have real and significant consequences on the brain. Understanding these effects and how to combat them can help us promote overall health within ourselves. So again, education and awareness that what the difference for us between just regular everyday stress and good stress and toxic stress is really important for us to become aware of. And so I don't know how many of you guys have ever heard of this acronym, HALT. So we start talking about using little tools like this to become more aware of what's going on within ourselves. And so HALT stands for hunger, being angry, L is lonely, and T is tired. And so this is kind of a personal inventory that we can do within ourselves to see maybe these are areas that are going on within us that we have to pay more attention to in order, because they could be catalysts that continue to contribute to toxic stress or high levels of stress in our life. While hunger, anger, and loneliness and exhaustion are not the only sources of anxiety and stress, they often serve as a catalyst to those negative emotions or triggers, which many of us may be familiar with. Generally, hunger and exhaustion are easy to identify. Anger and loneliness can take fairly longer to identify, as they usually tend to snowball from a sensitive thought or triggering memory. Stress management toolbox should acknowledge the elements of HALT in some ways as a method of prevention as well as stress management or being proactive in addressing our stress and stress levels in our life. So we'll talk about some of these things that I'm going to talk about actually are fairly obvious. What we can use to help regulate our stress and to take care of ourselves. And the first one is exercise. Exercise is wonderful for us. It has an array of positive qualities that it can help us physically and actually when we're exercising, how it affects our brains also. And so it biologically makes you happy. When you exercise, the pituitary gland releases endorphins, which produce feelings of euphoria and pleasure. I'm sure that people have heard runner's high. So after you've been running for a while, you actually experience this release of endorphins. Or you can get that pretty much in any form of, intense exercising. You can experience that. But the brain will dump endorphins. Active participation in exercise is one of the very few ways you can manipulate your body on a physical level to produce the emotive results that you want to produce. Habitual exercise. I was going to take this one out. I didn't like this one, but habitual exercise is a highly effective stress management tool, and one that can change not only your mind, but your body as well. Just one of the many perks. But I guess that comes from being an addictions counselor and recognizing certain behaviors can be problematic because we have a susceptibility to become obsessive compulsive. And it's still important for us, even though exercise is a wonderful thing to include in our own wellness programs, it certainly could be a problem. When I was asking some of my clients recently in group about that, and immediately asked them, well, how could that be a negative thing, habitual exercise? They said, relationships, right? I was telling my wife wanted to spend some time with me at night, and I'm telling her I wanted to go to the gym. That could end up being a problem, right? So as what we're always trying to do in our life is to form balance in our life. And so it's important that we maintain awareness of these balances in our life. So just 30 minutes of walking every day can contribute to decrease in anger and frustration. You walk with a friend. I know, shout out to Dean in the back there. I know, because I often see him. I'm never in the pictures though, because I'm not there, right? But I know they go walking a lot as part of, that's sober life activity, right? And so they go out and they walk. It seems like you guys have been out quite a bit this summer. So what a great way, what a stress reducer, what a way to start your day. And looks like a lot of you guys are committed to that because I see the same people in the pictures again and again. So that's really cool. Walk outside and exposure to nature lessens the effects of seasonal affective disorder. So do sun lamps, I hear. They do that too. You got to be careful because you might get a sunburn from them, which I was a victim of one time. Of course, eating healthy. How big of a challenge is that for us today, is to eat healthy? You know, honestly, we live in a society where if we want to eat healthy, it costs us more money a lot of the time, where the fast foods and stuff are the cheapest out there and most convenient for us. But proper nutrition is so, so important. I'm glad my wife isn't here because she'd be calling me on this. So, but I try to eat as healthy as I can. This takes me back to when I was like in grade school, when you're going over all the healthy food groups and stuff. But it still remains true. It's important that we get diversity in our diet to include vegetables, fruit, whole grain foods, lean meats and poultry, reduced fat, milk products, not energy drinks. I don't like to use this word too much, but I hate energy drinks. They are not good for you. Healthy eating increases your productivity by the way of proper bodily function, enhances your mood by regulating your blood sugar, and lowering your risk for depression. It stabilizes your weight. All of these reasons and more make healthy eating an exceptional stress management tool. Now that looks like me. So this was just something that was interesting. It was from the National Sleep Foundation. Recommended hours of sleep, they say these age groups require. Of course, when we're younger and we're running around and doing a lot of activity and stuff, we need more sleep. Actually, and it goes from 8 to 10 hours by the time we're 65 or older. They say 7 to 8 hours. But getting the proper amount of sleep is very, very important for all of us. And there's a lot of things that I know interfere with our sleeping patterns. Certainly, as individuals begin recovery from addictions, majority of those really suffer with sleep disturbances and irregular sleep patterns. A lot of that is due to the chemistry of the brain and the need to reset the brain so it starts producing the proper chemicals, the serotonin. And so sleeping it off. So I think it's important that I always say, you know, sleep can be problematic too if we're talking about the need to have balance in our life. We certainly don't want to sit around and sleep all the time. That also can be an indication of depression, right? If you're sleeping the day away. But providing your body with proper amounts of sleep has a wide variety of benefits, from pain management, lower risk of injury, to emotional regulation, weight control, clarity of thought, and more. Sleep's a fantastic stress management tool when implemented into your daily routine. So we need proper sleep. And laugh it up. So being able to laugh, and I always say, certainly a part of recovery, it's so important that we have a sense of humor. As weird as it might get for us sometimes, in macrobia times, it's important that we maintain our sense of humor, because laughter in our life is so important. And it is hard, especially, you know, when we begin an individual begins a recovery program. Of course, there's a tremendous amount of stress involved in trying to put your life back together, because of all the chaos and destruction that we've left behind us. But when we're developing self-care programs, it's a process, and none of this stuff takes place in a short amount of time. It takes practice, it takes time management, it takes structure, but laughter is such an important tool in our ability to process stress. What do they say? And I don't know if I'm going to say this right. The simple act of smiling can, even though you don't feel like it, if you smile, your brain will start producing certain chemicals, kind of as a, I'm saying reflex, that's not the right word, but it just will automatically recognize that and begin producing certain chemicals in our heads, that, in our brains, that are good for us. So the immediate effects of laughter are plenty. Psychologically, your body actually responds to laughter, similar to the effects of exercise, by increasing your oxygen intake, which feeds the heart and lungs, releasing endorphins again. It increases your heart rate and blood pressure, causing a significant release of stress, and relaxing your muscles by increasing your blood circulation. So how do we do that when we don't feel like laughing? And just some avenues that we could pursue. Some of the most obvious things is to watch a funny movie or listen to a comedy station. I just put watching me try to build something, because my wife laughs at me when I'm trying to do that. The sober life. Another shout out to the sober life in this community. If, I don't know, I assume some of you out here are familiar with the sober life. And they have a lot of fun. They do everything from going out and playing volleyball, to arts and crafts, to going on walks, to doing water balloon fights. every single one of those activity promotes laughter, wouldn't you say, Dean? Yeah, you guys have a lot of fun, and I'm sure that you experience a lot of positive effects from that also. Feel good after participating in those exercises and those activities, right? So when choosing friends and romantic partners, look out for a good sense of humor. Laugh at yourself. Even if you are by yourself, you might look a little strange doing that, but I certainly think it's important that we laugh at ourselves, and that's part of our own humility. Physically place yourself around people who are laughing. You can schedule game nights with friends, but it's important as part of this is just another tool in our toolbox to help reduce our stress levels. And laughter can improve your mood by lessening depression and anxiety, relieve pain in your body, improve your immune system by lessening negative thoughts, which have a chemical effect on your body, and increase your feeling of connection to others. And then, of course, prayer, meditation, and mindfulness. The effects of all of those are very similar for us. So prayer connects people to a higher power that provides comfort and guidance, especially in times of stress. It has other benefits too. It has been shown to improve self-control, make you nicer, make you more forgiving, increase trust, and offset the negative health effects of stress, especially if the prayer focuses on the welfare of others. So praying for others can be very helpful for us too. And then meditation. During meditation, the goal is to find serenity and calmness of body and mind and reach that happy place where we have a new perspective on stressful situations. There are many different types of meditation, but they all generally aim to help reduce negative emotions, slow down the heart rate, and regulate breathing. And so when we talk about mindfulness, I don't know if you guys are familiar with mindfulness exercises. And I can tell you, when I went through treatment, I remember one of the counselors doing a session on mindfulness, and I was certainly still at a state of becoming more open to new ideas and methods. And of course, I thought a lot of things were just stupid and psycho babble stuff. And he did this exercise involving a coin, a mindfulness exercise. I don't know if anybody's familiar with this or not, but I remember not paying much attention to it, but it did resonate with me. And when I returned home, I remember I had so much stress coming down on me. I actually was facing some criminal charges, and I didn't know if I was going to prison, and cops don't do too well in prison. I was worried about that. I didn't know if my wife was going to leave me. I didn't know if I was going to lose custody of my children. And I didn't know what I was going to do for a living later on in my life. Everything had seemed lost to me. Certainly levels of toxic stress going on in my life. And I felt so overwhelmed that I didn't know how that was going to end for me. Because, you know, high levels of toxic stress, like we talked about earlier, can lead to suicidal ideation, suicidal thoughts. And I certainly was there. But I remembered this exercise this counselor had shown about the coin. And I thought, I got to do something because I don't know how I'm going to get through this next few minutes, let alone these next few seconds. And I actually sat down in my living room and I found a coin and I closed my eyes and I did everything I could just to push everything else out of my thought process, identifying the things that I controlled, identifying the things I couldn't control. And all I did was hold on to that coin. And I did it for about 10 minutes. And all my thought went into this coin. And I felt the ridges on the outside of it, the coolness on one side, the warmness on the other side, the structure that was in there, trying to figure out who I think it was a president in there. But I spent 10 to 15 minutes just focusing on this coin and not thinking about anything else. In that moment, I'm always going to remember that because something that I thought just was ridiculous and wouldn't help me, I opened myself up to a new idea. And I used it, and it was effective. It helped me get through the rest of that day. by just using that mindfulness technique. And there's a lot of different mindfulness techniques we can use, and I certainly encourage you guys watching this presentation to explore those. There's plenty of information online about mindfulness activities and techniques. Of course, meditation and prayer. And so during meditation, next slide, those are different types of meditation. Of course, we talk about mindfulness meditation. I kind of gave an example of that. Mantra, guided meditation, Tai Chi, yoga, walking. Calvin, don't you do Tai Chi? No? Prayer and meditation often do go together also. They're complementary, but when used to offset stress, they take your health and wellness to a better, healthier place. So these stress management tools, all the ones we've talked about tonight, exercise, healthy eating, sleeping, prayer, meditation, and laughing, I know they do seem simple. And they can be simple for us. But our greatest challenges are actually incorporating them into our lives. Or what I really like to use with my clients is the HOW acronym, and how important that is to incorporate that into our life: honesty, openness, and willingness. And so when we're talking about developing techniques to manage our stress, certainly we have to gain awareness of what those techniques can be. But our greatest challenge, as is with many things, is actually having the willingness to practice these things and incorporate them into our lives. But it kind of ends with developing healthy tools to manage stress and recovery takes time, and it takes willingness to change the way you're feeling. And there's that 21 days, they say it takes to establish a habit, or some people say to break an old habit. So I think that's about all I got on that. So thanks for listening to me.
Thank you very much, Jeff.
You're welcome.
And I'm actually going to have to kind of borrow you here. We're going to be switching, folks, we're going to be switching the microphone over here and having our panelists come up. And as we do that, hopefully you can hear me. I'm having to use the lavalier, and we're switching over, and it should be momentarily. And as that's going on, if our panelists could come, we actually have spots for the chairs. Come on up, and we're going to get the panel started.
You're gonna sit me in the middle, huh? Oh, okay, you say me?
Yeah, right now.
Oh, yeah, right, sit me in the middle. The little lady goes in the middle, all right? You sure that's 6 feet?
Chris, are we good to go? We're good to go. All right, so welcome back, folks. And we're now moving into part 2. I'm trying to get myself right here with the camera of tonight's presentation. And so again, we have our esteemed panelists. And if you guys could go ahead and introduce yourselves. We'll start with Shauna. And then also, please let us all know, I thought a great one that'll give people insight is, why'd you become an addiction treatment professional? Why'd you get involved in this? What kind of really motivated you? So we'll start with Shauna.
Hi, I'm Shauna Applegate. I'm a family nurse practitioner at Alluvian Health, located at Gateway. I got into addiction treatment because I saw the huge need for it, and I have a extensive family history of addiction throughout my entire life, and so it's something that's near and dear to my heart.
Thanks, Sean. Hi, I'm Trudy Nelson. I am working at Seeking Recovery, which is an outpatient facility for addictive processes. Why did I get into them? For the money?
Not true.
Wrong. I myself am a recovering alcoholic and have a soft spot for people who have addictive problems, and originally was in the medical field and then switched over to do addiction counseling. That's a kind of a really nice meld of medical field and mental health. I guess that's all I can say. I like doing it. watching people's lights turn on. Okay, Ben, you're up.
All right. My name is Ben Horn. I'm a licensed addiction counselor. I work at Rocky Mountain Treatment Center. I've been over there about 1 year. I've been in the field probably close to 30 years. I'm a recovering alcoholic. Why did I get into this field? Probably some of the same reasons that our two previous ladies stated. I come from a family history of extreme severe alcohol and addicts in a community that was severely inflicted, as most reservations are. And that was probably the driving force that got me into this field. And I love to help people. I love that this is a very challenging field, but if we can reach that one person out of 100, we're doing our job. And like Trudy, I got into it for the money. So, no, I always tell young and aspiring counselors, if you're in it for the money, you're in the wrong profession. So, yeah, so, but that's why I got into it.
I was going to say, I'm going to have to come back to Rocky Mountain Treatment Center. Yeah, again, my name is Jeff Falk. I'm a licensed addictions counselor at Gateway. I've been there since 2015. From 2012 to 2015, I was actually over at Rocky, and I loved Rocky. Rocky's a great place. And so I've been counseling for the last 8 years. Prior to that, I was in law enforcement for almost 20 years. I guess probably for me, certainly my years in law enforcement, I thought I knew everything about addiction, and until I actually went through my own addiction and went to treatment, I began to realize how little I understood about addiction. And so certainly, you know, a lot of times when you go into treatment, a lot of your people that are in treatment with you are aspiring to become chemical dependency counselors because they're riding this pink cloud. But, you know, the ones that actually do, there's not a whole heck of a lot of us. It certainly takes a lot of work, but, you know, similar to what the other panelists have said is, I know how hopeless I felt when I was in treatment and facing all the consequences of my addiction. And there were some key individuals in my life who showed me great compassion and empathy and did not cast judgment upon me. And I only hoped that I could possibly bring that to patients that I could work with if I had become a chemical dependency counselor. And so it is a very challenging field. But you know, there's a lot of hope in seeing that one individual that recovers. And so, yeah, certainly I wanted to bring hope to the hopeless. So.
Thank you all very much. No, I mean, it is, I have worked in treatment at the front of the house. And so I go out and talk to a lot of folks, and Trudy, you know, would be very helpful for me when I would go and then have folks. But as someone that's been in treatment myself, more than once, so you know, you can get there. I have more than 3 years now, but it's a very stressful job. And I think getting to that, right, you talk to folks that have been through a lot of trauma. It's a very stressful job. So I wanted to each have one of, you know, each of you say, you know, what's one thing that you do on a daily basis for self-care to make sure that your job doesn't kind of take over and that you're able to reduce your stress? John?
That one's pretty easy for me. I invested in a hot tub and I'm in it every night for well, at least an hour probably. I don't know. That is totally what does it for me.
I want to come to your house.
Anytime. I promote it heavily.
Okay, I would say a couple of things. One is I've got some fur babies, okay? 3 fur babies that bark, and they give me a lot of comfort. I like to do a lot of yard work, doing physical work outside, get some of that excessive energy out. Other self-care, I do a lot of reading. And not just reading in professional literature, but reading for fun and games, you know, fun stuff. And I have to say also, I play Disney Battle Mode almost on a daily basis. And you meet some nice people. So some of my social outlets are through a video game. So yeah, that's how I take care of myself. The end.
Yeah, I probably got like these ladies. I probably have more than one. Probably the biggest thing. I was listening to Jeff and giving his presentation on self-care and some of the things that we need to do. And you guys are all going to laugh. And you guys are going to think I'm crazy. I have a what we call a what do we call that in recovery? An addictive personality. So I run every day. I'm the crazy guy. I'm a fitness fanatic. And there's not a day that goes by that I don't miss running. And I come from a family of runners, and I know it's very obsessive compulsive. And I'm also a health fanatic. We have a joke in Indian country that goes like this: what do you call an Indian that can't hunt? Vegetarian. So I'm a vegetarian. I'm a health fanatic, and I do a lot of self-care in those two paths. I do artwork. I read a lot, and do a lot of study. And probably the thing that keeps really centered and grounded is my faith, and my Christian faith as a Roman Catholic, and I also practice my Native American beliefs. I smudge every morning. The sun comes up, and that's very important, and that keeps me very, very grounded. So those are some of the things that I do to take care of myself.
I would kind of say the same thing, is that hands down, without a doubt, my number one priority is my relationship with God. My faith, I really believe that only through the grace of God that I'm sitting here today. I was never meant to live in addiction. I was meant for greater things than that. And so my prayer life is very, very important to me. I'm also Roman Catholic, and so involved in the church and within that community. I did buy, finally, a teardrop camper this summer. That actually contributed to some of my stress, but we actually got out like 6 times and went camping, and we've been, my wife and I have been camping for a little while now, but so I get out, and I actually also spend a lot of time. My girls are gone now, so that was a big stress relief. They're not in the house anymore, but that's a joke. I love them dearly. But we have a lot of little, I guess, I don't want to say I'm getting to the age I can be a grandpa, but I guess I am. And there's some the families in our neighborhood that we're able to socialize that have younger children, and they call me Uncle Grandpa Jeff, and that is an important part of taking care of myself too, is staying connected with other people.
Thank you. So I know a lot of us in recovery, we struggle with boundaries. And I consider that to be part of my issue, right? I'm a consummate people pleaser. You grow up in a house with a lot of violence and uncertainty, and you just want everything to be okay. But I do think we also all know that if you're not able to say no, right, and preferably to be able to say no without a modifier on there, it really heightens your stress. And so I guess what I would like is a kind of how to enforce boundaries 101 or boundary enforcement for dummies. Is those of us that are just getting started and that really struggle, what's something that you could do tomorrow to kind of ease yourself in and be able to have a healthy boundary with someone? So we'll start this time, we'll kind of change it up. Ben, would you like to start on your thoughts on boundary, and then you guys can just kind of jump in?
Sure, boundaries 101. So one of the things that I learned in my walk of recovery is to say no, and that was really difficult to do in the beginning of my recovery. And I came from a family that had a very codependent mother, and I came from a large family, and a lot of us were sought approval from other people, and that really followed me in my recovery. And so it was really hard to say no, because in my culture, it's really difficult to see people suffer. We're not supposed to do that. If we see somebody suffering, we're supposed to help them as much as we can. So in my recovery, it really contradicted who I was. So I had to really learn that the hard way, and I had to draw that firm line. Being in the military really helped. I don't suggest everybody go to the military. I don't, but it really helped me establish who I was and to really find that voice. I think that's one of the things that I really try to educate with my clients that I work with, is to find that voice. all of us have a voice. We all have rights. And it's really important to teach that as best as we can. And some of us haven't found that voice yet. So, but saying no is probably one of the most difficult things to do in life, to anything, whether it's to a slice of chocolate cake or whether it's to our partners and telling them you can't drink here. It's a constant, for me, it's a constant revolving door. And it's something that I really try to push for with my clients that I work with.
Okay. So when I'm talking about boundaries, I'll use communications right along with boundaries. And a lot of the time, if any of you guys have been in counseling or treatment, you've probably heard of how we have to learn how to communicate our thoughts and feelings more assertively. And we try to teach I feel statements. And that certainly for me was one of the most difficult, awkward things I think I've ever done in my life, because I had a tremendous amount of maladaptive behaviors and controlling conversations, whether it was with my wife or anybody else. It was a competition to make sure I got my way, which had disastrous results continually and created conflict. But I was taught to begin to learn how to talk about my feelings in an I feel way. And it was funny because when I started doing that, I had to practice it and practice it, and I'm still practicing it today. But it was kind of funny that my wife didn't know about this form of communication. But eventually, as I continued to talk like this and communicate with her like that, she started to do the same thing back to me. And so certainly learning how to communicate in a healthier way is an important part of becoming better at setting boundaries in our lives, because you know what we say about if we keep going to the barbershop, we're eventually going to get a haircut, right? So we got to identify those people, places, and things and feelings that we need to have boundaries with in our life.
Boundaries are difficult, especially, you know, growing up with an alcoholic mother. Codependent behaviors sure do come naturally, it seems, and it is something that you struggle with every single day. But one thing I do is it's really helped is just allow myself time before I respond to something. That has been the most beneficial for me. So I will, instead of just, oh yeah, I'll do that for you, wait, really process what you're about to say. And I don't always get it right, and I still, again, like these guys said, it's every single day that you work on it. But just kind of taking a pause before you respond to something has been something beneficial to me.
Cool. I like teaching about boundaries, and one of the first things I think I do when I teach about boundaries is let the individual know they are worth having boundaries, because a lot of times there's a lot of low self-esteem, low sense of self-worth, people-pleasing. I discuss and have them understand boundaries is where you end and I begin, and then there's a little space in between, and that's normal. And we discuss unhealthy and healthy boundaries. The first thing I do when I start teaching them how to set boundaries is teach them physical boundaries. You know, there's a physical space comfortable, and I'll get right up next to a client and you can see them kind of wiggle and squiggle, and I say, a little uncomfortable there? Okay, well, what can you do to be less uncomfortable? And they sit there like, and I say, well, you can tell me to move. Trudy, could you move a little bit so that, you know, oh, okay. And so I'll move back a little bit until they get their comfort zone back. So they begin to relate physically that there's a comfort zone. And then as we understand boundaries a little more, there's mental boundaries and emotional boundaries and spiritual boundaries. So I think if people can start understanding that physical boundary first, and they get it in their head, oh yeah, it's okay to say no. It's okay to say back up. I like to tell a funny story about, I was teaching a young man, he had no boundaries whatsoever. And so I said, I'm going to deliberately get in your space. I says, and I want you to call me on it when I get in your space. And he said, okay. So about 20 minutes after group, I walked up kind of to the side of him, and I put my hand on his shoulder, and he went, did I say you could touch me? You know, this scared the heck out of me. But I about had a heart attack. And he about had a heart attack. And I said, good boundary setting. And then later when we talked, I said, well, you know, he says, yeah, I probably could have come off a little less harsh. I said, yeah, you could soften it down a little bit when you begin. But he was beginning to get the idea. And so you have to get the idea. It's okay. It's okay. This is my space. You know, this is my space. This is my space. So that's how I tell people to say that.
Absolutely. No, there's so much great stuff there. I do think boundaries and communication, that assertive communication. I can't tell you how many times, you know, you say, you make me feel right, and you did, and it's I feel, and it really does change the way you relate with folks. So something that's big is trauma, right? And I want somebody first, you know, we hear this term, trauma, right? Trauma-informed care, trauma. And we know that it's intricately linked with addiction. What I would like is first someone to give us a definition of what trauma is, and then what I would like is one thing that you recommend to folks in the audience that have suffered trauma or know folks that have suffered trauma that is helpful to them to either try to work through it or to work with somebody that has trauma, has had trauma in their past.
You want an hour's worth of lecture, don't you?
Well, we'll try to keep it in 5 minutes or less, but we got plenty of time, so don't hold back. So, Trudy, does that mean you want to start?
Not in a heartbeat. Mm-mm. I will, but not in a heartbeat, though. I'm going to start. Trauma is something that in some way, shape, or form harms me or harms another person, either emotionally, mentally, or physically. So there's more than one kind of trauma. Something that shatters somebody's baseline. We feel like, you know, this is a nice and safe world, and it really isn't. You know, we're taught some basic things like, if you do right, right things will come. Well, we know that's not true, you know. What would I tell a person that has trauma? Usually I get somebody that you know, if they're telling me their traumatic past or some kind of a traumatic incident, I usually lean forward and say, I hear you. I hear you. I recognize that you've had pain, and I'm so sorry that happened to you. You know, I can't fix it. They know I can't fix it, but there's something about identifying with another person's pain. You don't have to fix it for them. They have to fix it. But knowing that you validate that they've been through something traumatic, I validate you as a person. I validate that experience was horrible, and I wish I could change it, but I can't. And so all I can do is listen. What would you like to do about it? And I let them have the power back. If I try to fix it, I'm taking the power away from them again. If I give them validation, I give them the power to heal. That's all I do. That's it. The end. Is that esoteric enough?
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
No, that was very helpful.
That was a good job, Trudy.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much. You got any trauma you need to talk about?
I have plenty of trauma. You know, I think that a lot of times when you have individuals who have suffered, like you say, emotional, physical, sexual trauma in their life, a lot of the time they embrace responsibility for that too. And so some of the work that I do is allowing them to accept that they weren't responsible for these things, and to try to work towards, I like the word healing in that, but to talk about it, but actually be able to identify. When we talk about trauma, a lot of the time we'll immediately go to something that a lot of us could identify as trauma in our life, like being sexually assaulted or being physically abused. But there are a lot of forms of trauma. And one of the things for me that and this sounds silly sometimes, but in my recovery, in my healing, I had to go all the way back to when I was a little kid, and I was a little redheaded kid. And I often tell them being a redheaded kid was traumatic for me because I got made fun of a lot. And so part of those trauma experiences is taking on these beliefs of self based on the experiences and what other people tell you you are. And that certainly, when it begins in childhood, it goes forward into the rest of your life and your belief and attitudes. But I often try to work with clients using rational emotive behavior therapy also to identify what is irrational and what's rational. And but having that willingness to, and it's awful uncomfortable. It's really uncomfortable because we don't want to go back and relive those things. But, you know, my perspective, I think that going back and talking about trauma can be problematic sometimes for some people, but my overall experiences have been the importance of actually exploring those areas of trauma in our life that have contributed to our some of our core issues that we deal with on a daily basis. So.
Thank you, Jeff. Yeah, trauma. So I really agree with Trudy as far as she breaks down the levels and the kinds of trauma. I served in a combat zone when I was in the military, and I didn't know anything about PTSD. So when I was diagnosed with PTSD, it was something very new to me. And then I began to learn about historical trauma and all the phases of historical trauma. So one of the things that I try to teach, like my addiction, when I stopped fighting and battling and denying my addiction, and I accepted that I was an alcoholic and I did have this disease, I made peace with that. And I made peace with myself, and there was a lot of forgiveness in that. And I think when we embrace our trauma and we look at certain things and we tell ourselves, I wasn't the cause of that. I was not the cause of that. I didn't make that happen, but it did happen to me. You know, my father used to always tell us a story that what happened to us historically happened to our ancestors, didn't necessarily happen to me, although it does have a lot of remnants within me. So I've accepted that, and I've learned to make peace with that and move on. And I think that's probably the best message that I try to work with people is, I really agree with what Trudy said. We can empathize with that, right? Not sympathize, but we can empathize with that and listen to people and acknowledge and validate what they went through. And I think for somebody to do that for me, to sit down and listen to me, because a lot of times I didn't want to talk about my traumatic events because I felt nobody's going to listen to me. Nobody's going to hear me. They're not going to want to hear my stories of woe. But when somebody actually sat down and listened to me and validated that with me, that was very healing. It was very soothing to do that. And so that's probably the best thing I can give to my clients and the people that I work with.
So like I said, there's a lot of different kinds of trauma. About a year ago, I got an email. I'm on a lot of email lists for trauma because I am working towards a degree, trauma-based degree. And that it said that meditation was the #1 thing to help improve trauma in the brain. And I kind of look at it from a little different perspective than these guys. You know, I'm looking at the medical, the cortisol leaking into the body and the chronic stress, and how are we going to get that down so you don't have all these extra risk factors for cancer and thyroid disease and pretty much any medical condition you can think of, your risk goes up with chronic stress. And I kind of laughed at this email, and I'm like, I am not telling people that meditation is the #1 thing to improve their trauma in their brain. And then I, sat back and thought about it, and I'm like, okay, let me just process this. I have a lot of trauma too. If you guys are familiar with ACEs, I'm a 9 out of 10.
Right.
And so I was like, okay, well, maybe I'll try this meditation thing. Pretty good. If you've never tried it, really, it just kind of slows the mind down, brings you back to the self, and has been very beneficial to a lot of people. So meditation would be my answer on that.
Thank you very much. So and those in the audience that may not be, the ACEs is adverse childhood experiences, and you can take a survey, you look it up on the internet, just Google in ACEs, and it'll take you there. And it is pretty profound. You'll read the numbers on as you get up, if you have 1, right, and it may be that you grew up in poverty, right, or you were abused or neglected, you get up to that 9, and the numbers are staggering. How many folks are really struggling with addiction that are up there in that 8, 9, 10?
I actually get an ACE score on every patient that I see, and most of them are over a 4. So 4 is kind of the cutoff of really high risk, and most of them are above a
It's unbelievable. So I want to talk now about COVID. We know it's been a big issue in the world this year. And I have looked at preliminary data that I've seen says that suicides, overdoses are up, anywhere between 30 and 40% nationally. And I do think we need to put that in perspective of how high it is in 2019. There were over 70,000 drug overdoses in the United States alone. So what is some way unique about to cope with COVID that you guys have, or just kind of your thoughts, on COVID and what we can all be doing as people in recovery and as professionals to kind of adapt to the COVID-19 pandemic. And so
I know the Zoom meetings have been very beneficial for a lot of people. Even people who were a little apprehensive about going to an AA or an NA meeting, they were like, well, Zoom, okay, I'm still at my house, I'm in my comfort zone, I think I'm gonna finally try this for the first time ever. And now they're into it and loving it, and it's a way to be social and still get some of that recovery help that they're looking for. So that the Zoom meetings or the online formats as a way to socialize, because social interaction is huge. And so we've got to try to keep it up while we're on lockdown.
Yeah, absolutely. Certainly in treatment, we often talk about the importance of human connection. And a lot of what individuals struggle with, that you find they're struggling with active addiction, is this feeling of not being connected to community or the world around them. And I know that this whole COVID thing, some of my thoughts and beliefs, I get a little radical on some of this, but some of the intangibles that we're not able to measure right now, we're going to see in the future. Certainly, from my own personal experience at Gateway and my clients, I think it's wreaked havoc with our clients. Our relapses, our absconsions, that's a word, went through the roof. So, I mean, I know we have things, I just try to promote to maintain as much human connection with each other as we possibly can. And I know that, yeah, we have the ability, and I am very thankful for it, that we have Zoom, that we can do telehealth and stuff, but still there's that absence of connection over a video screen, and I really think we need to be together as human beings. I'm scared. I don't know what to say, because I don't know where all this is going to end for us, and I don't know what kind of long-term effects this is going to have on society. As an addictions counselor, I have seen, its immediate effects of not having that connection, in realizing even more how important that is for us as human beings. So try to stay connected to the very best of our ability. Don't fear one another,
Wow, this is a loaded one, and I think for myself, when I look at the whole pandemic, and this conversation is so top heavy, it can go in any direction. Any place you bring up COVID, any topic any group you speak to, it can go in so many different directions. And I like to think that the big thing for me is accessibility. I think the accessibility that we have with the clientele that we work with is severely impacted. And nobody has any clear-cut answer as to what we should do, how we should approach this, protocols, guidelines. And we can get very deep with this, and I'm not going to do that. I think at best, I work in an inpatient facility, so I've been very fortunate to be DAB as an essential worker, and we've really tightened our protocols, so we've been able to remain open because of that. And our agency has taken it a step further and gone beyond phase 0. And I think because of that, we've been able to remain open. And our screening is pretty top heavy, so I'm really proud of that. But is every agency doing that? No. My fear is that we're not going to have any clear-cut answers, and we're living in a very dark time right now. But the silver lining in this for me is I'm going to be able to look back and say, I made it through this. I got through this. I was one of the frontline workers, you know, and I have my concerns, I have my fears, and I try not to convey that to the people that I work with. And I lived a life of a nun, of a priest. I go home, I go to work, and that's it. I'm in phase 0 all the time. I go to the store and get food, and that's about it. And does everybody do that? Probably not, you know. But I think for myself, I look at all this, a lot of confusion. And I think for the really sad part in all of this is the clientele, the people that we're trying to serve and trying to get to, they're the ones that are really impacted. And that's really sad. And I think that we just have to keep plugging forward. And I just commend the bottom of my heart, all the first responders, the medical ER people, the counselors out there doing frontline work. It is tremendous work. And I really believe that we will get through this, so.
Wow, how can you follow that, Ben?
Oh, you'll be able to.
I think it takes, when I'm thinking about the COVID, I'm not thinking just about the COVID, but everything that's happening around us right now. I think you're right, Ben, we're in a dark time. If you remember, it started with the COVID, and then it started with the riots, and the riots got more, and the COVID got more, and then we got wildfires on the West Coast, and we got hurricanes coming up from the south, and it's like, you know, I kind of pop into MSN every morning just to see, you know, on the computer, just to see what's going on, and it's like you get disaster fatigue. Okay, I get disaster fatigue. The clients get disaster fatigue, and you can just imagine. You know, I'm like you, Ben. I'm you know, you almost might call my house a nunnery, except it's got dogs. I think you need to look at it in 3 different approaches. One is self-care. The other is, what do I do for my clients to help encourage them and to give them some kind of hope in the dark time? And if my batteries aren't fully charged, then I can't help them charge their batteries. And so, as much as I can encourage people while we have the connection with them, and the other is the people that we come in contact with. There's a thing called the Desiderata, and one of the lines in it says, "Above a wholesome discipline, be gentle with yourself." So be gentle with yourself, but be gentle with others. You know, when was the last time you just kind of made a joke to the person at the cash register? You know, you were so in a hurry to get that little card in and punch your number in and get the fuck out of there. But you know, what's the harm in making a little joke or saying hi to the cashier? Boy, you know, it's been a hard day. Be gentle with those around us. And so I think with all the disaster fatigue going on, if I can back up and remember, I'm a human being, my clients are human beings, and I'm surrounded by human beings. So let's all be gentle with each other. Because eventually we're going to come out on the other side. Where are we going to be? I don't know. Okay, but we're going to be there. We're going to get there. So what are you doing right now to give yourself a sense of peace and to share that with others? So that's where I'm at with the COVID.
Beautiful. Now that was extraordinarily helpful. So one thing that we can do, of course, we have access to all these books, so we can read. And I find, you know, great solace in kind of getting into the minds of some of the great thinkers. And I just wanted to know, it doesn't have to be, you know, necessarily a therapy book, right? But a book related to stress that you could read and you take some real solace from. If each of you could just name one book. I know that's tough. If you need to do a couple that really stand out to you, it'd be wonderful.
I got one. It's a Viktor Frankl, Man's Search for Meaning.
Oh, turkey bite, you took mine.
Yeah. If you haven't read that book, I tell you, it was actually when I went back to school, that was one of my first reading assignments from my psychology professor. Never read anything like it before, and it certainly resonated with me because I believe I am a faithful spiritual guy, and to read a man's account and experience with being in such a horrible situation of being in the concentration camp, and just seeing the worst side of humanity, to maintain his, what I would say, faith and his ability to find out what his search for meaning. But I would say faith for me is extremely important in managing my stress too. I think St. Thomas Aquinas said faith is, now I'm forgetting this, faith is believing in what you can't see until eventually you see what you believe in. And I think that is important, that, you know, we continue to tell ourselves, like Trudy and Ben and Shauna have said, is to believe we're going to make it through this. And so literally having that positive attitude that we're going to come out stronger through this, is we got to keep a positive attitude. Good things in, good things out. And I was going to say, I even tell people, and I've had to do this, when what we feed our souls, you know. I turn off the news when I find myself watching the news. There's so much negativity out there. I just turn it off. I got off of social media here for 3 weeks, a couple weeks ago, and I felt so much better when I was able to do that, because I wasn't feeding negativity into my life. I focused on my family and my friends and my clients. So it was just a little something I wanted to share.
I don't even have cable anymore, so I get that
Yeah.
shut it off. It's been beneficial. Oh, the book thing. I can't really answer that right now because I've been in school, and so I'm still totally in the study zone. But I do a mindfulness journal every day. There's tons of different ones you can get, and they walk through different mindfulness practices that can be beneficial in everyday life. So. But I haven't read for pleasure in I don't know how long. I don't have time right now.
I kind of like, Jeff, I like your pick, Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning. I think that's pretty deep. I'm going to be a little less conventional. I have 3 that popped in my head. See if I can remember. Les Miserables by Victor Hugo. Tale of Two Cities by Charles Dickens. And let me darn if I can remember the third one. But basically, it's about people who strive against insurmountable odds. And basically it's like the good against evil and choice, and that eventually the positive conscience wins out. So it's a little more formal reading. The story's really cool, right? But we're going to fight battles our whole lives. I mean, that's what life is about, is struggle. And it's just good to be able to read some of the classics, Les Miserables and Tale of Two Cities, and know that eventually the individual may not win, but the individual wins within themselves, if that makes any sense. The individual wins within themselves. The good will out within each person. So those would be 2 fun ones. Yeah. And if you want to really get deep, try Marcus Aurelius. Okay. He kind of put forth, you do right just because that's what we need to do. Not because anybody says you have to, but just because it's the right thing to do. And when we do, that's when community begins to heal. And that's it, the end. Tale of Two Cities is the bestest one.
Now my response to that, Trudy, is how do I top that? Jeez. All right.
You know how big we feel anyway, so
There
it's
you
hard
go.
to pick.
I think good reads for me, I think anything that has to do with not giving up and perseverance. And there's so many volumes of good reads that cover those topics. I think for myself, anything that has to do with Nelson Mandela is amazing. And there's been many movies, many books written about the man. The ability to not give up, the ability to persevere in the face of adversity. One of the best reads I ever read in my life, and I've read a lot of books, two actually. One was on a guy by the name of Bobby Sands, who was a political activist from Ireland, and his ability to not give up in the face of adversity and have that faith in what he believed in and actually to die for that. That really touches my heart. That just really touches my heart. And probably another one that is equally amazing is the autobiography of Malcolm X. Very controversial figure, huge controversial figure. But one of the things amazing about his story is his ability to forgive and make peace. Not only with others, but with himself, and to forgive others. And I think that's just a beautiful mark of a human being. If they're able to do that in the face of adversity, no matter who you are, no matter where you come from, no matter what color you are, that is a beautiful, beautiful thing. So those two reads just jump out at me big time. So.
Thank you very much. Those are all great readings. So I do want to do a little plug on social media, right? I think we're just inundated with it. There is a great movie out that just came out on Netflix. It's a documentary called The Social Dilemma. And for any of you that start your day on social media, if you're finding yourself before you even, kind of get your cup of coffee, if you roll over, I just highly encourage you to watch that. I too took a 3-month break. It fundamentally shifted my perspective, my routines. But so really look at what those companies are doing, right? What I took away from it is they say, if they're not selling you a product, you are the product. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with social media, just to understand what that is about, that you are, it's your time is the product, so they can sell stuff to you. And to understand that they have very sophisticated algorithms that don't care whether you're happy at all. That's not the point. But so we are coming to the end of our hour on the panel. And I always, they say, like a politician, right? They answer the question you wanted them to ask. And so I want to give you guys a chance without any kind of lead and just say, it's stress and relapse. What's the link? That's the presentation. What did you want to say when you came up here tonight that you may not have gotten a chance to say? And we can close with that.
Wow. Yeah, I was sitting there on the sidelines there when I was listening to Jeff speak, and I believe this was Stigma, basically. So one of the things that I tell my clients, one of my mantras, my main philosophy that I live by, is I tell my clients, I have a disease that tells me I don't have a disease. And there's a lot of clients that look at me kind of like dumbfounded, like, what does that mean? So we talk about that and how powerful this disease is, right? And how criminalized it has become. And we try to really break that down and get rid of that stigma. And I think to normalize, and we are human beings. We are who we are, right? And I'm a Native American. We love to laugh. We love to goof off. And so I'm going to end it with this tonight. If you learn anything from me tonight, know this. Learn this. Where there are 4 Catholics, there's always a 5th. I learned that from my father. I learned that from my father. So I'll leave you with that. So.
Oh, that was bad, man.
Yeah, it was. So, hey, I'm a Catholic. I can say that. So
you get a pass.
Yeah, I get a pass. So.
If only I knew what I know today when I was a young man. But obviously we don't have time machines and we can't go back and redo things that have been done. Take care of yourself. And for such a long time in my life, through my own arrogance and my lack of humility in my life, it really contributed to a lot of emotional and psychological issues that I struggled with. But learning to take care of ourselves is so important, and I often say that in a treatment facility, you certainly wouldn't have to be an addict or an alcoholic to benefit from what we're teaching in treatment. We're basically teaching people how to take care of themselves better. So we'll put exorbitant amounts of times into pretty trivial things in our lives, and how much time are we putting into actually learning how to take care of ourselves. And you know, that includes from the biocycle social perspective, you know, take care of ourselves on all of those levels. And I really think that we can truly become happier, healthier people, but there's always hope. There's always hope. And I've seen miracles literally in people and turning their lives around. But we got to certainly have the desire and the willingness to explore areas that we haven't been open to in the past. But I just would reiterate the importance of self-care, taking care of ourselves in our lives.
I think during the COVID pandemic that, you know, we brought in, that our social relationships and our environment has been huge on stress levels and relapse. And so, you know, building those strong, sober social connections, like the sober life, I think that's great, and I love that we have that here in our community. And just building relationships that improve your overall level of happiness, that benefit you in positive ways and don't bring you down or increase your stress level. I mean, we all need those in our life, and that's where I would go with that, I think. The end.
The end.
I like that. I'm gonna still.
Kind of bouncing off of what all y'all have said is, I like to present it the disease concept. We have a disease, not a stigma. We are not defective human beings. We are human beings with a disease. And if you don't believe it, just ask Jeff or Ben or Shayla? Sean, okay, or myself, and we'll explain it to you, the disease. A lot of times my clients ask a couple of questions. Why did this happen to me? And do you think there's hope? I don't have any answers to your why. All I can say is you've been through what you've been through to get to where you are. And you are where you are now to get to where you're going. Where do you want to go? And is there hope? And I'll look them right straight in the eye and I'll say, you still sucking air? Because as long as you're sucking air, there's hope. I've seen some people that I wouldn't think it would have made it, but I wouldn't tell them that. And they come back after they go away and they're sober and they're clean and they're in this wonderful job that's helping people. Okay? So never give up. Like Charlie Brown and Lucy with the football, right? That little dude's been kicking that football around for over 30 years, trying to kick it around. And Lucy always is there. And you remember, he'll go up to kick the football and she jerks it away. So I have a slide, I have a PowerPoint slide with Lucy holding the football and Charlie Brown getting ready to kick it. And it says, never give up. Never give up. So, the end.
Wow, that's a perfect way to end. You know, that hope is essential. I just cannot thank you enough, everyone that is joining us live tonight and then online. For the folks online, there is the survey is up now. But I'd like to, you know, those of us in person, give a huge round of applause for our speaker, Jeff Faulk, and our panelists, Ben Horn, Sean Applegate, and Trudy Nelson.
So do any editing on this? Because I said a couple of unkind words.
We'll take care of it, Trudy. But thank you again to everyone for coming out. We will have surveys outside for you to fill out. And make sure to join us on Thursday when we have Dr. LaToya Floyd, who's a pediatric psychiatrist from Memphis, will be doing a presentation called Why Are America's Students So Stressed Out? So thank you all again. Have a wonderful night. Nice.